Welcome, welcome to my ex dirty secrets.
It was almost midnight when I saw it. A single glistening strand of blonde hair curled against the gray tile of our shower wall. It clung there stubbornly, swaying slightly from the steam, catching the light from the half-dimmed bathroom bulb like a thread of gold spun by some cruel trickster. For a second my brain didn't process it. I just stood there, water running over my shoulders, the scent of eucalyptus shampoo thick in the air. Then the realization dropped like a stone in my chest. I don't have blonde hair. Neither does Daniel. My hands froze mid-lather, fingers tightening around the shampoo bottle. Every tiny sound in the bathroom sharpened. The rhythmic drip of water from the faucet, the faint hum of the exhaust fan, the pounding of my heartbeat against my ribs. I stared at that strand for what felt like a full minute, trying to come up with explanations. Rational ones. Maybe it was from my mother. She visited last week. No, her hair's silver now. Maybe from the salon. I hadn't been there in months. Maybe Daniel brought it in from the gym. Some woman's hair on his towel or his shirt. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. But the longer I looked, the louder another voice whispered beneath all the excuses. You already know. I pulled the hair from the wall with trembling fingers and held it up. It shimmered, almost angelic. Smooth. Glossy. The kind of blonde you see in commercials. Expensive, cared for, deliberate. Not an accident. Not random. The shower water was scalding, but I felt cold. Daniel was asleep when I came out. His chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths, one arm draped over my pillow like he was protecting something precious. His phone was on the nightstand, face down, plugged in. I stood there for a long time, dripping onto the floor, staring at him. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. There's a peculiar kind of stillness that follows suspicion, the kind that makes every innocent thing look staged, rehearsed. The faint trace of perfume on his t-shirt hanging from the chair, the late-night text he brushed off as work stuff, the sudden new cologne I didn't pick for him. Each one flickered in my mind like a reel of images, tiny warnings I'd ignored. And now this hair. Sounds so small, so absurd to feel your world tilt because of a single strand. But that's how betrayal works, isn't it? It hides in plain sight until the smallest thing tears the fabric wide open. I slipped quietly into bed beside him, the damp towel still clinging to my skin. I stared up at the ceiling, listening to the faint rumble of the city outside. My chest ached with something I couldn't name yet. Fear, anger, grief, denial. Maybe all of it at once. He stirred in his sleep, murmuring my name, and I flinched like I'd been burned. The next morning I woke before him. The hair was gone. I'd flushed it, like evidence I wasn't ready to confront. But the image stayed burned in my mind. When Daniel came into the kitchen, he looked freshly showered, clean-shaven, smelling faintly of that new cologne again. Citrus and musk, sharp enough to sting my throat. "Morning," he said, voice warm, casual like any other day. "Morning." He smiled, reaching for a mug. "You okay? You look tired." Smiled back. "Just couldn't sleep." My voice didn't crack. That scared me most of all. He kissed my forehead, oblivious, or pretending to be, and I let him. The warmth of his lips felt foreign now, a borrowed gesture. I watched him stir sugar into his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. It was so ordinary it felt grotesque. As he grabbed his keys and turned to go, I asked, "You working late again tonight?" He hesitated for half a second. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. "Yeah," he said. "You know how end-of-quarter reports are." He nodded. "Of course." The door closed behind him with a quiet click, and I exhaled for the first time that morning. I stood there in the silence, hands gripping the edge of the counter, mind spinning. I needed to know. Not just suspect, no. That's when the idea came to me. Quietly, almost gently. A shampoo. He always used mine, even though he had his own bottle. He said he liked the scent, lavender and eucalyptus. What if I could know who else used it? So that afternoon I went out. To the pharmacy. Bought a second identical bottle of my shampoo. Then I went to the small shop downtown, the one that sells salon products. I asked the woman at the counter for something that changes hair color subtly, something to reveal highlights. She looked confused but handed me a clarifying additive, harmless, meant to strip buildup and slightly lighten hair tones. Perfect. When I got home, I poured half of it into the shampoo bottle. My hands didn't even shake. I told myself it wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Proof. That night, Daniel showered before bed. I lay there pretending to read, ears straining to hear every sound, the squeak of the tap, the rustle of the curtain. My pulse thudded in my ears. When he came out, his hair glistened wet under the light. Still brown. Still normal. Nothing changed. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was crazy. But then, as he leaned down to kiss me goodnight, a faint scent drifted off his skin. Something floral, something that didn't belong to either of us. And I realized this wasn't over. It had just begun. The scent haunted me the next morning. Soft, powdery, almost floral. Not my perfume. Not anything I owned. It lingered faintly on his pillow, clinging to the fabric like a secret whispered in the dark. I buried my face in it, inhaling until my throat tightened. There it was again. Not synthetic like air freshener. Not detergent. Human. Personal. My chest constricted. I sat up abruptly, staring at the sunlight slicing through the blinds. For a moment, everything around me looked sharper, like the world had been cut with a blade. The edges of the dresser, the reflection of light on the doorknob, the faint ripple in the mirror. Once you start doubting, you notice everything. The shirt he wore last night was draped carelessly over the chair. I picked it up, fingers grazing the collar, and there it was again, the faint floral trace. My heart pounded so hard it made my vision blur. The rational part of me wanted to stop, to not go any further, because I already knew where this road led. But another part, the darker, quieter part, needed the truth, even if it hurt, even if it shattered everything. I took the shirt to the laundry room, slid it into the hamper, and whispered to myself, "You'll know soon." That night, Daniel didn't come home until after midnight. He texted around 10. "Still at the office. Don't wait up." I replied, "Okay. Love you." He didn't answer. I sat on the couch for hours, the TV flickering silently. The city outside hummed with its usual restlessness. Car horns, distant laughter, the faint pulse of music from the bar down the street. But inside our apartment, it was just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the ticking of the wall clock counting down to something I couldn't name. At some point, I got up and wandered into the bathroom. His shampoo bottle was still on the shelf. The trap I'd set looked so innocent, so ordinary. Part of me hated myself for doing it, for sneaking around like this. But another part felt steady, controlled. For once, I held the secret. When he finally walked in, the first thing I noticed was his hair. Damp. He must have showered somewhere else. "Hey," he said softly, slipping off his shoes. "Sorry I'm late. Work was crazy." "Where'd you shower?" I asked, voice calm, neutral. He blinked, taken aback. "Huh. You said you'd been at the office, but your hair's wet." He froze for half a second, then smiled, too quickly. "Gym. Stopped by on the way home. Figured I'd rinse off there. The gym closes at 11. Another pause. "I went to the one downtown. It's 24-hour. "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "Makes sense." He relaxed a little, walking past me toward the bedroom. My pulse thudded against my ribs, every instinct screaming. I followed him quietly, watching his every move, the way he peeled off his shirt, the slight tremor in his voice when he asked how my day was, the way he avoided my eyes. I wanted to scream at him, demand the truth. But instead I tucked it all away, storing every lie like a bead on a string, one by one. Because I wasn't ready yet. The next few days were torture. He grew distant, distracted. His phone was always face down, locked with a passcode I didn't know. He started coming home later, smelling faintly of the same floral perfume. But I stayed silent, smiled, cooked dinner, asked about his day. Pretended not to notice the lipstick smudge on his coffee mug that wasn't mine. 'Cause I was waiting for the next strand of hair. It came 3 nights later. He'd left for a conference dinner. I waited until the clock struck 10, then went into the bathroom. The air smelled faintly of citrus and steam. On the edge of the sink, a hairbrush. But when I picked it up, my stomach turned. Nestled between the bristles was another strand of blonde hair. I sat down on the toilet lid, holding it like it was a relic from some holy, terrible truth. My fingers trembled. The room felt too bright, too still. That's when I saw something else. Faint streaks of light brown residue around the drain. I leaned closer. A shampoo. It had reacted. Someone else had used it. The realization hit me so hard I almost dropped the brush. It wasn't just paranoia. It wasn't in my head. Someone had been here. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't see confusion or fear. I saw anger. Pure white-hot anger, pulsing beneath my skin like electricity. He came home past midnight again. His shirt smelled faintly of wine and perfume. He didn't notice me sitting in the dark. "Hey," he whispered, startled when he saw me. "Why are you up? Couldn't sleep." He smiled nervously, setting his keys down. "You're scaring me, babe. What's going on?" "Nothing," I said softly. "Just thinking." He studied me, then shrugged, walked past me toward the shower again. I followed him with my eyes as he disappeared behind the curtain. The sound of water filled the silence. I stared at the door, heart pounding. Could go in. Confront him now. But something stopped me, not fear but calculation. Because confrontation gives closure. And closure was mercy. He didn't deserve that. When he came out, he looked at me with a tentative smile. "Feel better?" "Yes." "Yeah," he said, toweling his hair. "Good," I replied, eyes locked on the damp towel, streaked faintly with gold-tinted residue. He froze when he saw where I was looking. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just noticing the color." He laughed awkwardly, glancing down. "Must be the light." "Maybe." I smiled sweetly. "Or maybe it's just revealing something that was already there." He frowned, confused. But I turned away before he could see the tear that slipped down my cheek. Not from heartbreak, but from something deeper, darker. Resolve. Because now I wasn't just suspicious. He knew. And knowing changes everything. After that night, something in me shifted. It was subtle at first, quiet, controlled. But I could feel it, a change in my pulse, in the way I looked at Daniel, in the way I started cataloging every word, every glance, every absence. Before I'd questioned myself. Now I questioned him. I began keeping track of his stories, the small inconsistencies that built up like hairline cracks in glass. He said he'd been in meetings until 9:30, but the company posted an office photo at 8:45. Everyone there but him. He said he grabbed dinner with the guys. Yet his credit card statement later showed a single transaction at a wine bar with a name that sounded too elegant for the guys. Every new discovery hit like a heartbeat in my chest. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't paranoid. I was watching the truth unravel thread by thread. And through it all I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I kissed him goodnight. Because pretending was power. But when you live inside a lie long enough, you start to suffocate on your own silence. One evening he came home earlier than usual. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine half finished, my laptop open in front of me. He walked over, leaned down and kissed my cheek. "What's for dinner?" I looked up at him, smiled softly. "I ordered takeout. Thought I'd give you a break." He grinned, ruffling my hair like I was some obedient pet. "You're too good to me." My stomach twisted. As he moved past me, I glanced at the back of his neck. A faint red mark just below his hairline. Froze. "What's that?" I asked before I could stop myself. He turned, blinking. "What?" "On your neck." He reached up, fingertips brushing the spot. "Oh, must be from shaving." I murmured, sipping my wine. You don't shave there. He laughed lightly, but his eyes darted away. You notice everything, don't you? You have no idea. For a long moment we just stared at each other. His smile faltered first. He looked down, muttered something about changing clothes, and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat there, gripping my glass so tightly I thought it might crack. I wanted to confront him, to scream, "Who is she?" But instead I whispered to myself, "Not yet." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, his slow breathing beside me infuriatingly steady. I thought about the hair, the scent, the towel, the mark on his neck. And I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just angry. I was curious. Who was she? What did she look like? What did she have that I didn't? Those questions became an ache that gnawed at me. I needed to see her, to know her, to understand the enemy in my own story. So I started looking. Daniel wasn't careless. He hid things well. But no one hides everything. Started with his phone. I never went through it before. I believed in privacy. But now, privacy felt like privilege, and he'd forfeited that. One night while he showered I picked it up. His passcode was new, but I remembered how his thumb always hovered over certain digits when he typed. 4197. His birth year reversed. It worked. I shouldn't have felt proud, but I did. Inside everything looked clean, too clean. No suspicious texts, no messages, no late-night calls. But when I opened his photo app, I saw a hidden folder. My fingers trembled as I pressed it. Tasked for the same passcode. Entered it. And there she was. Woman. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. Smiling in the passenger seat of a car that looked painfully familiar, ours. Another photo. Her head on his shoulder. His hand on her thigh. Another. Both of them laughing at some restaurant I'd never been to. And then the final one. Selfie. Her wearing his hoodie. My hoodie, actually, the one I bought for him on his birthday last year. I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The sound of the shower stopped, and I panicked. I locked the phone, set it back on the nightstand, crawled under the covers. My whole body trembled. When he stepped out, towel around his waist, he looked at me and smiled. "Hey, still awake?" I turned my face toward him, forcing my expression calm. "Barely." He climbed into bed, kissed my shoulder, and within minutes, he was asleep, like a man without a care in the world. I lay there in the dark, staring at the faint outline of his profile, and whispered, "I saw her." He didn't stir. Something inside me cracked then. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Quietly, like glass under too much pressure. The next morning I couldn't look at him. Not really. I went through the motions. Coffee, breakfast, a forced smile. But my mind was elsewhere. Her face. Her laugh. The hoodie. He left for work around 8. When the door clicked shut, I sat at the kitchen table and cried. Really cried. For the first time since the blonde hair. It wasn't the kind of crying that brings relief. It was the kind that hollowed you out. Because the truth isn't just pain. It's humiliation. It's realizing you were the punchline in someone else's private joke. When the tears finally stopped, I felt empty. But beneath that emptiness, something began to take shape. Cold. Precise. If Daniel thought I'd break quietly, he was wrong. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I wasn't going to scream or beg or leave. I was going to make him feel what I felt. Slowly. Silently. And when it broke him, he wouldn't even understand how it happened. Because revenge isn't fire. Size. The morning after the discovery, I woke with an eerie sense of calm. The storm inside me had gone quiet, replaced by something colder, sharper. I looked at Daniel, still asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm sprawled across my side of the bed. He looked peaceful, innocent, unaware that I'd already peeled back the skin of his lies. I almost pitied him. Almost. I slipped out of bed, made breakfast, and greeted him with a smile when he came into the kitchen. "Morning," I said, placing his coffee on the table. He kissed my cheek. "You're up early. Just thought I'd start the day right." He smiled unsuspecting. He didn't notice the way I watched him drink his coffee, the way I studied every expression, every shift in his eyes. Because now, every moment was a performance, and I had become an actress of terrifying precision. As he left for work, I hugged him longer than usual. He looked surprised. "You okay?" "Perfect," I whispered. And I meant it. Because for the first time in weeks I felt in control. I started small. The first step wasn't about hurting him. It was about balance. Restoring what he'd taken from me, power. That evening, when he texted that he'd be late, I replied with a single heart emoji. He probably thought I'd stopped caring. But what he didn't know was that I was following him. He always parked 2 blocks from the office, said it was easier to find spots there. So that's where I waited, engine off, lights dimmed, watching the entrance through my windshield. When he came out, he wasn't alone. She was with him, the blonde woman from the photos. They laughed as they walked toward his car, their hands brushing, her head tilting toward him with the kind of easy intimacy that comes from repetition. He opened the passenger door for her. Gentlemanly. Practiced. My throat tightened, but I didn't move. Didn't honk. Didn't cry. I just watched them drive away, memorizing everything. The way he smiled. The way she touched his shoulder. The way his hand rested on the gearshift, dangerously close to hers. When they disappeared down the street, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the ache. It wasn't jealousy that burned. It was clarity. Now I had a face. Name Lisa from his office. I'd seen her tagged once in a group photo on the company's Instagram. She was younger, prettier, the kind of woman who laughed with her whole face. I hated her. And yet, a part of me wanted to know her. Because she wasn't just the other woman. She was the reflection of everything I wasn't. At least, not anymore. That night, I didn't confront him. Instead, I asked about his day, smiled when he lied, kissed him goodnight. He fell asleep fast. I lay awake, staring into the dark, thinking. I didn't want to destroy him with a scream. I wanted to dismantle him quietly, piece by piece. So I started there, by becoming unpredictable. The next few days I changed small things. I stopped texting him during work hours. I stopped waiting up for him. I started dressing differently, bolder, sharper. When he asked where I was going, I smiled and said, "Out." "Out where?" "Just out." He didn't like that. He started calling more, checking in, suddenly missing me. The irony almost made me laugh. By the end of the week, I noticed the cracks forming in his confidence. The guilt was showing, little slips of unease in his tone, quick glances when I didn't answer right away. Once he came home early. I was in the living room on my phone, half smiling at something on the screen. "Who are you texting?" he asked lightly, but his jaw was tight. "Just someone from work," I replied, locking the screen. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. "Anyone I know?" "No." He stood there, studying me, and for a moment I saw something like fear flicker behind his eyes. But that night he reached for me in bed, for the first time in weeks. His hands traced my skin with something desperate, almost pleading. Let him. But when he whispered, "I love you," I didn't say it back. He froze, confused, but didn't ask why. The silence did more damage than any words could. The next day I went further. I waited until he left for work, then drove to his office. I parked where I could see the entrance, same as before. An hour later Lisa arrived. Bright dress, golden hair glinting in the sunlight. She laughed with someone at the door, then disappeared inside. I watched her for days after that. I learned her schedule, her favorite cafe, the way she touched her necklace when she was nervous. She wasn't evil, just naive. Once, I even followed her inside that cafe. Sat 2 tables away, ordered coffee, pretended to scroll my phone while listening. She was on a call, giggling softly. "Yeah, I'll see you tonight," she said. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. He says she's always tired lately. My stomach turned. I gripped my cup until my nails dug into the cardboard. When she hung up, I met her eyes for a split second. She smiled politely, not recognizing me. That smile broke something I didn't know was still intact. Because she wasn't a ghost anymore. She was flesh and blood. Real. And that meant the rules had changed. That night, Daniel came home early again. Nervous, distracted. "Everything okay?" I asked, stirring dinner. He nodded. "Yeah. Just rough day." He sat down, watched me for a long time, then said, "You've been different lately." "Different how?" "I don't know." "Distant." Smiled. "Maybe I'm just tired." "From what?" I set the spoon down, met his eyes. "Keeping up appearances." He froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" I tilted my head, voice soft but cold. "It means pretending everything's fine when it isn't." He opened his mouth, closed it again, looked away. Let him wonder. After dinner, he reached for his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. I caught the reflection in the window. Lisa's name lighting up the screen. He silenced it instantly. I didn't say a word. He slept restlessly that night, tossing, turning, mumbling my name in his sleep. I just watched him, eyes wide open in the dark. He was cracking. Slowly. And I wasn't done yet. The morning after the dinner was heavy and still, like the air before a storm. The sky outside was bruised with gray, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't leave early for work. He was sitting on the couch when I came downstairs, his elbows resting on his knees, his phone face down on the coffee table. He looked up, his expression soft but guarded. "We need to talk," he said. My pulse raced. Every cell in my body screamed run, but I sat down across from him, clutching a mug of coffee I didn't even taste. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "You've been distant lately." Suspicious. Checking my phone. Changing things in the house. "I've noticed." I met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "You've given me reasons to." He sighed, his eyes dark with fatigue. "Is this about the hair?" The words hit me like a slap. He knew. "How?" "I saw you find it," he interrupted quietly. "That morning. I came out of the shower and saw your face. You looked shattered. And I didn't say anything because I didn't know how to." I blinked, my mind whirring. "You knew and didn't explain." "Would you have believed me?" he asked, voice breaking. "You already had a story written in your head. Every late night, every text, every business trip. You turned them into evidence." I felt my throat tighten. "Then explain it. Who's the blonde, Ethan? Why was her hair in our shower?" He looked at me, and for a long, aching moment he said nothing. Then he sighed, shoulders sagging. "It was Chloe." The name sliced through the air. "Chloe," I repeated. "The assistant who calls you at all hours. The one you said was just work." He nodded slowly. "But not the way you think." I laughed, a brittle, joyless sound. "Oh, of course. Because there's always a way that makes you the noble husband, right?" He didn't flinch. "She came over one night. Talk. Her fiancé had cheated on her, and she didn't have anyone else. She was drunk, upset, and I let her crash here on the couch. That's it." I stared at him, every nerve in me torn between fury and disbelief. "You expect me to believe that?" He looked me dead in the eye. "I swear, Harper. Nothing happened. She threw up in the bathroom, I helped her clean up, and she used the shower in the morning. That's where the hair came from." The room spun. Felt dizzy, nauseous. A small, rational voice whispered it could be true. But the larger, louder part of me, the part that had been hollowed out by weeks of doubt, couldn't let go that easily. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I knew you'd react like this," he said softly. "You haven't trusted me for months. I thought if I told you, you'd see it as proof. So I said nothing. And now here we are." His voice cracked on the last words, and for the first time, I saw something genuine in his face, fear. Not of losing me, but of something deeper, heavier. Guilt. Or regret for something else entirely. I don't know what to believe anymore, I said, tears stinging my eyes. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. Then believe me when I say I love you. That I haven't betrayed you. That you're building ghosts out of coincidences. I wanted to scream that he was lying. I wanted to throw the mug, to watch it shatter like the trust between us. But I didn't. I just sat there silent as the truth, or his version of it, hung in the air like smoke. Later that day, while he showered, I did something I'm not proud of. I went to his phone again. The passcode was still the same. My hands shook as I scrolled, searching for Chloe's name. The last text was from the night she'd supposedly been here. Chloe. Thanks again for letting me crash. I owe you big time. Ethan. No problem. Glad you're safe. Don't mention this to Harper, she'll overthink. The floor seemed to drop from beneath me. I couldn't breathe. Not because of what he'd done, but because he knew me so well. 'Cause he was right. Had overthought. I had doubted everything. But he'd still chosen deception. Even if it was small, even if it was meant to protect me, it was still a lie. That night we barely spoke. He tried to hold me, I turned away. And in that silence, I realized something chilling. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to be guilty or innocent anymore. If he was guilty, I had a reason to leave. If he was innocent, then the problem was me. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and stared at him sleeping beside me. He looked peaceful, unaware that I was studying every inch of him. The familiar scar on his jaw, the soft rise and fall of his chest, the lips that had whispered 1,000 promises I wasn't sure I could believe anymore. And that's when I made a decision. Not revenge. Not forgiveness. Something quieter. More dangerous. I was going to find out the truth. Not by asking him, but by seeing it with my own eyes. So I packed a small bag. I said I was visiting my sister for a few days. I kissed him on the cheek, pretending to be calm, and when he smiled with relief, I almost believed him again. Almost. Then, as I drove away, I didn't go to my sister's. I went to the city. To his office. The building loomed ahead like a glass monolith, reflecting the gray sky. I parked across the street and waited. I watched employees come and go, watched Ethan's car pull in at exactly 8:43. And then, at 9:02, Chloe arrived. She was even more beautiful in person. Tall, graceful, the kind of woman who didn't need to try to be noticed. She walked straight into the building, laughing at something on her phone. And there it was again. That feeling. That raw, pulsing ache in my chest. Jealousy. Fear. But most of all, confirmation. Maybe he hadn't touched her that night. Maybe the blonde hair had an innocent origin. But I'd seen the way his eyes lingered when her name came up. The way his voice softened when he said, Chloe. Some betrayals aren't about sex or lies. Sometimes they're about attention. About emotional loyalty. About energy that used to belong to you, and doesn't anymore. As I sat there watching him hold the door open for her, their smiles lingering just a second too long, I realized it didn't matter whether he'd cheated in body. He'd already cheated in heart. And that hurt more than anything he could ever confess. I stayed in my car for nearly an hour that morning, watching Ethan and Chloe through the glass of his office building. It was surreal how ordinary it all looked. Two people laughing over coffee, leaning toward each other just a little too often. Her hand brushed his arm once, casual but intimate, and he didn't pull away. That single gesture told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't the crazy, jealous wife inventing stories to fill the silence between us. There it was, quiet, simple betrayal, dressed up as friendship. By the time Ethan left the building for lunch, my decision was already made. I drove back home and went straight to the bathroom, the scene of my first suspicion, the place where everything had begun. The blonde hair. The shampoo. The quiet corrosion of trust. I stood there in the shower, the water running cold, trying to remember what it felt like to be sure of someone. I couldn't. When Ethan came home that night, he was startled to see me. "You're back early," he said. "Plans changed," I replied. My voice sounded foreign, flat, calm, dangerous. He smiled uncertainly and set his keys down. I was actually going to surprise you later. Dinner, maybe. Perfect, I said. Let's have dinner. The silence between us at the table was thick enough to taste. I watched him cut into his steak. His movements measured, controlled. Every time he looked up, I smiled sweetly, as though nothing had changed. Halfway through I said, I saw Chloe today. His fork froze midair. You what? At your office, I continued, sipping my wine. She's very pretty in person. I can see why you like working with her. He set his fork down slowly. Harper, don't do this. Do what? I asked, tilting my head. Observe. You said I was imagining things. That I was building ghosts. I wanted to see for myself. Nothing's going on, he said firmly. I told you that. Then why did you lie about her being here? He sighed, rubbing his temple. Because I didn't want to hurt you. That's the thing about lies, I said quietly. They always hurt. They just take longer to land. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching mine. You don't trust me anymore, do you? I didn't answer, because there was no single moment I could point to and say this is where it broke. It wasn't the hair, or the text, or even Chloe herself. It was the accumulation, the 1,000 tiny hesitations, the silences, the deflections. The moments where I reached out and he pulled just slightly away. I want to believe you, I said finally. I really do. But when I saw you two together today, something in me knew. Even if you haven't done anything you want to. And that's enough. He exhaled shakily, his shoulders slumping. You're wrong. Then prove it. His eyes flicked up. How? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. On the screen was a video, taken from my car through the glass of his office. It showed him and Chloe laughing, her hand brushing his arm. Harmless, maybe, but not innocent. He stared at it, his face draining of color. Do you see what I see? I whispered. Because if that's how you look at her. Tell me, Ethan, when's the last time you looked at me like that? He closed his eyes, pressing his hands to his face. It's not what it looks like. I almost laughed. It never is. I stood, pushing my chair back. I packed your bag. It's by the door. You can figure out the rest later. Harper. I'm done begging for honesty. I'm done being the woman who checks her husband's phone just to sleep at night. He looked shattered. But I didn't feel triumphant. There was no satisfaction in it. Just an aching emptiness, like I'd finally ripped out a splinter that had been poisoning me, only to realize the wound underneath was still bleeding. He rose slowly, his voice low. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said. But it's my mistake to make. He hesitated like he wanted to reach for me, but thought better of it. He grabbed his bag, walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he said softly. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to make you feel safe again. The door shut behind him. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. I sank to the floor, the wine glass still in my hand, and for the first time in months I cried. Not out of anger but relief. The truth was finally out, and it was uglier, smaller, and more ordinary than I'd imagined. Not a grand betrayal, not a cinematic affair. Just slow neglect, misplaced affection, cowardice. Days passed. The house felt larger without him. Colder too. But it was mine. One afternoon I went into the bathroom again. The same spot. The same light. I opened the cabinet to grab the shampoo, and something fell from the top shelf. A small, clear hair tie, golden strands twisted around it. Blonde. I stared at it, my stomach turning. He'd lied again. There was no drunken night on the couch. No innocent shower. She'd been here before. Probably more than once. And just like that, the fragile peace I'd built shattered. But instead of screaming or crying, I smiled. Because this time it didn't destroy me. This time it confirmed what I already knew. I hadn't been crazy. I hadn't been paranoid. I'd just been right too soon. I placed the hair tie on the edge of the sink, looked at it one last time, then turned on the shower. The water ran clear at first, then pink. Streaks of the dye I'd started using after he left. A dark auburn, deep and rich. Nothing like the golden strands that had haunted me for months. As the steam filled the room, I whispered, "Goodbye." To no one in particular. Not to Ethan. Not to Chloe. But to the version of myself that had lived for someone else's truth. And when I stepped out of the shower, the mirror was fogged, but I could still see my reflection. Blurred, yes, but free. The hair tie was gone. Or maybe I'd simply stopped looking for it.